My in-laws showed up with a moving truck. Not a visit. Not a "we're in the neighborhood." Not even a text. A moving truck. The kind with a lift gate. The kind you rent when you're not asking. You're taking. It was a bright Saturday morning in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. The kind of morning that makes everything look innocent. Sun on the lawns. Kids' bikes tipped over on driveways. The soft whir of sprinklers clicking on 2 houses down like nothing in the world was about to change. I was barefoot in the kitchen, hair still damp from the shower, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't even tasted yet, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the doorbell camera. I glanced down without thinking, and my stomach dropped so fast it felt like gravity grabbed it, because there they were. A white box truck parked right in front of my house, and behind it, 2 cars. One was my ex-husband's, and the other belonged to his parents. I didn't move at first. I just stood there with the mug hovering near my mouth, watching the screen like it was a bad reality show I couldn't turn off. And then I saw her. My mother-in-law, Carol. Perfect hair, perfect smile, sunglasses even though the sun wasn't that bright yet. And beside her, my father-in-law, Ron, carrying a clipboard like he was about to inspect a rental property, not the home I'd been sleeping in for the last 6 years. My ex-husband, Mark, stepped out last. He shut the car door with the confidence of a man who believed paperwork mattered more than a person. And when he looked up at the doorbell camera, he smiled. Not a warm smile, a smile that said, "We're here, and you can't stop us." My coffee suddenly smelled like nothing. I set the mug down slowly, like if I moved too fast I'd shatter. Then I walked to the front window and peeked through the curtain. They weren't just standing there. They were waiting. Like I was late to my own eviction. My heart pounded once, hard, like it was trying to warn me. And then the doorbell rang, 1 clean chime. I didn't answer. The second chime came faster. And then Mark's voice came through the speaker, smooth and casual. "Hey, Lena, open up. We're here to get the rest of my things." The rest of his things. Like my home had become his storage unit. I pressed the talk button without opening the door. "What moving truck, Mark?" A pause. Then he laughed softly, like I was being dramatic. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." There it was. That line. The one men use when they're about to hurt you. But they want to act like you're the problem for reacting. I took a breath. My fingers were cold on the phone. "What are you doing here?" His mother leaned toward the camera like she was performing for an audience. "Sweetheart," Carol said, voice syrupy. "We're just helping. It's time to move on." Move on. From my own house. I stared at the screen, and in that moment, I realized something that made my skin go tight. They weren't here to pick up boxes. They were here to move me out. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back, still holding my phone, and forced myself to think. Because panic is expensive, and I couldn't afford to pay for it. My name is Lena Parker. I was 38 when this happened. I work in compliance for a healthcare network, the kind of job where you learn to read the fine print before you sign anything, and where you learn that the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the calm ones, the ones with clipboards, the ones who show up smiling like they've already won. And Mark. Mark had always been the calm one. In public, he was charming, a good guy, the kind of man who held doors open and said "ma'am" and made strangers trust him in 30 seconds. In private, he was a collector, not of art, not of memories, of leverage, every favor, every sacrifice, every compromise. He kept them like receipts. And when our marriage started cracking, he didn't try to fix it. He tried to profit from it. It started 6 months earlier, the day he walked into the kitchen and dropped an envelope on the counter like it was a pizza menu. "I found a better way," he said. I was chopping vegetables, half listening, thinking he meant a refinance or a budget plan or one of his sudden bursts of responsibility. "What is it?" I asked. He tapped the envelope. "An agreement, just something to make things simpler." Simpler. That word again. He used it like a charm. I wiped my hands and opened it. The title made my eyes narrow. Spousal Property Addendum. I looked up. "What is this?" Mark leaned on the counter with that practiced calm. "It's nothing serious. It's just, if anything ever happens, it protects us. Protects me. Protects him, not us." He kept talking, too fast, like he'd rehearsed it in the car. "You know I put a lot into this place. I just want to make sure my investment is recognized." Investment, that's what he called it. And yes, he'd paid for some things, a new fridge, a few repairs. He'd painted the guest room once and acted like he'd built the house with his own hands. But the mortgage, the down payment, the deed, that was me. This house existed in my life before Mark ever did. I bought it before we married, after 10 years of saving, budgeting, and saying no to vacations I wanted. My name was on the deed. Only mine. That was always the truth. And I'd always felt safe in it. Until he started whispering around it like he could change it with words. I slid the paper back toward him. "I'm not signing this." His smile didn't fade. It tightened. "Why are you making this a thing?" "I'm not making it a thing. You are." He sighed like I was exhausting. "Lena, my parents said this is standard." Ah, there they were. His parents, always lurking in the background like a second marriage. Carol and Ron had never liked me. Not because I was rude, not because I was careless, because I didn't need them, because I wasn't impressed by them. Ron owned a small construction company and acted like that made him royalty. Carol ran the family like it was a corporation, and Mark was her favorite employee. They wanted a daughter-in-law who fit into their picture. Someone pliable, someone grateful, someone who would let them help. But I had my own career, my own savings, my own house, and that made Carol smile sharper every year. So when Mark said, "my parents said," I knew this wasn't about protection. It was about control. I pushed the addendum away again. Still, no. Mark's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "Fine," he said. "Don't sign it. But don't act surprised later when things get messy." And then he walked out of the kitchen, leaving the envelope behind like a threat he wanted me to trip over. That was the beginning. The middle was quieter, the way a storm goes quiet right before it hits. He started staying out later, answering texts with his phone turned away, talking about options. Then one night, he said it. The sentence that changed everything. "I think we should separate." He said it like a business decision, not a heartbreak. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, because something in me had already started calculating. "How?" I asked. He shrugged. "I'll move out for a bit. You keep the house. We'll be civil." Civil. He said it like he deserved credit for not burning my life down. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "We'll do it properly." His eyes flicked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, attorneys, paperwork, a legal separation agreement." His smile returned, faint. "Sure," he said. "We can do paperwork." He loved paperwork because he believed paperwork was how you win. 2 weeks later, he moved into a furnished apartment across town. But his things stayed here. Boxes in the garage, tools in the shed, clothes in the closet. Every time I asked when he'd get them, he'd say, soon. Soon turned into months. And then, one Wednesday afternoon, I was at work when I got an email notification. Subject line, change of address confirmation. From a mortgage company. My mortgage company. My skin went cold because I hadn't changed anything. I opened it. The email was polite, cheerful, automated, and terrifying. It confirmed an updated mailing address for my account. Not my address. Mark's apartment address. I stared at it, heart thudding. How could he change the mailing address on a mortgage that wasn't even his? I called immediately. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I did what compliance people do. I asked questions. Can you tell me who requested the change? The rep hesitated. It looks like an authorized user. There is no authorized user, I said, voice tight. The rep put me on hold. When she came back, her tone was different. I'm seeing a power of attorney on file. A power of attorney. I actually laughed once, sharp, because it didn't make sense. No, I said. That's impossible. But she read the date it was filed, and my breath stalled. Because it was filed 2 months earlier. 2 months earlier. Mark had asked me to sign something quick before a trip. I remembered it suddenly, like a bruise you don't notice until you touch it. We'd been sitting at the kitchen counter. He'd slid a paper toward me, smiling, saying it was just in case. He needed to pick up a package or talk to the HOA while I was busy. I hadn't read it properly, because I trusted him, because I was tired, because he spoke fast and acted annoyed when I hesitated, and because I never imagined the man I married would use my signature as a weapon. My stomach turned. Email me a copy, I told the rep. I can't email it, she said, but I can mail it to the address on file. The address on file is wrong, I snapped before I could stop myself. Silence. Then, quietly, ma'am, you'll need to come into a branch with identification and dispute it. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at nothing, the world going muffled around me. A power of attorney. That meant Mark could talk to companies as me, could change things, could redirect notices, could do damage quietly. And suddenly his calm made sense. He wasn't calm because he was over it. He was calm because he'd been planning. That night, I went home and checked my mailbox. Nothing. No mortgage letters, no HOA reminders, no tax notices, because they weren't coming to me anymore. They were going to him. I drove straight to the county records portal and searched my address. My hands shook over the keyboard. And then I saw it, a document recorded 3 weeks earlier, a quitclaim deed, my name, and Mark's name. My breath stopped, because a quitclaim deed could transfer ownership, could shift interest, could muddy title. The signature on it looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was a version of my signature, rushed, bent, like someone had practiced. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I printed it. I printed everything, and I didn't sleep, because now I understood. The separation was never about space. It was about moving pieces into place. So when that moving truck showed up on my Saturday morning, I already knew. This wasn't spontaneous. This was step 12. I stood in my living room, phone still in my hand, staring at the door like it might break. And then my doorbell rang again. This time, Carol's voice. "Lena, honey, don't be stubborn. We're just here to help Mark get settled. He needs his things. And we need to start preparing the house. Preparing the house. My pulse throbbed. Preparing it for what? I asked. There was a pause, like she wasn't sure how much to reveal. Then she said it. For the sale. I went still. The sale? Mark's voice cut in. Yeah, we're selling it. It's cleaner that way. Cleaner. Like my life was clutter. I felt something in me shift. Not panic, not fear. A cold, sharp clarity. You can't sell my house, I said, slow. Mark chuckled. Lena, don't do this. We've already filed everything. Filed everything. I swallowed. Get off my property. Carol's tone hardened. Sweetheart, you're being emotional. Ron has the paperwork. We have movers scheduled. This is happening today. I stared at the door, then at my phone, and I realized something else. They assumed I'd open the door. They assumed I'd argue. They assumed I'd cry. They assumed I'd waste time. And time was what they needed. Because if they could get inside, if they could start moving things, if they could create possession and abandonment drama, they could build a story that made me look unstable, a story that made them look reasonable. So I didn't open the door. I did something else. I called 911, not to scream, to report calmly. There are people outside my home attempting to enter with a moving truck. They claim they have paperwork. I do not consent. I need an officer dispatched. The dispatcher asked if I knew them. Yes, I said. They're family, which makes it worse. She didn't laugh. She said, stay inside. Keep the door locked. Officers are on the way. I set my phone down on speaker and walked through my house, checking locks, closing blinds, making sure every window was shut. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. But I was done being surprised. Outside, I heard voices rising. Mark knocking now, not ringing. Ron's deeper voice. Carol's sharp, clipped words. Then the sound that made my stomach turn again. Metal, like someone testing the handle. I stood behind the door, listening. Mark's voice came through the wood. Lena, stop. Open the door. You're making this look bad. I laughed once, breathless. You did that yourself, I said. Ron spoke next, loud enough to be heard through the door. We have legal rights. You can either cooperate or we'll take next steps. Next steps. I pictured them with their clipboard and their rehearsed phrases, ready to bulldoze. I didn't answer. I just waited. Minutes crawled. Then finally, the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. A patrol car, tires on pavement, a door shutting, a radio crackle. I peeked through the side window. 2 officers approached. Mark's shoulders straightened like he was putting on a performance. Carol's hands fluttered. Ron stepped forward, clipboard out, ready to present his evidence. I opened the door just enough to speak, chain on. Officer, I said, I'm the homeowner. They are not allowed inside. Mark immediately started talking. Sir, she's my wife. We're separated. This is marital property. We're just removing my personal belongings. The officer looked at me. Ma'am, I kept my voice steady. This house is in my name only. There's a fraudulent deed recorded. I have documentation. And they arrived with a moving truck saying they're selling my house today. Carol gasped like I slapped her. That's not true, she said. We're family. We wouldn't... The second officer cut in. Do you have a court order? He asked Mark. Mark's smile faltered. We have paperwork, Ron said, waving his clipboard. Court order, the officer repeated, slower. Ron's face reddened. We're in the process, he said. The officer nodded once, then turned to them. Then you need to leave the property, now. Mark's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous, he snapped. She's being dramatic. The officer didn't react. Sir, leave. Carol's voice sharpened. This is her being spiteful. She wants to ruin Mark. She's always been... Ma'am, the officer said, firm. Step back. Do not approach the door. Carol actually blinked, like no one had ever spoken to her that way. And for the first time that morning, I felt something like relief. They weren't inside. They weren't touching my things. They weren't building their story. Not today. Mark threw one last look at my window. Not angry, calculating. And that scared me more than anger. Because anger is sloppy. Calculation is strategy. They left, slowly, reluctantly, climbing into cars, the moving truck still idling like a threat. The officer stayed until the truck pulled away. Then one of them turned to me. Ma'am, he said, if there's fraud on the deed, you need an attorney, and you need to lock everything down. I know, I whispered, because I did. And the truth was, I'd already started. That day, after they left, I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't call friends to vent. I opened my laptop and went to war with paper. I pulled my original deed, my mortgage documents, my closing file from years ago. I pulled the recorded quitclaim deed and compared signatures side by side until my eyes crossed. Then I called a real estate attorney on Monday morning. Not a general lawyer, a real estate litigator, the kind who eats fake deeds for breakfast. His name was Daniel Price. He didn't comfort me. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He said, email me everything, today. I did. And within 48 hours, Daniel called back. Lena, he said, voice controlled, that deed has problems, and the notary stamp looks suspicious. My stomach clenched. What does that mean? It means, he said, either the notary was negligent or someone forged it. I exhaled slowly. In the power of attorney? He paused. That one's trickier. But if you didn't understand what you signed, we can challenge it. We'll need proof. We'll need timeline. We'll need your texts, your emails, your calendar. My life became a case file. Every message from Mark, every quick signature, every don't make this hard. And the more I pulled, the more the thread unraveled. Because Mark had been doing something else too. He'd opened a home equity line of credit, in my name, using the power of attorney. It wasn't huge at first, just enough to be reasonable, just enough to slip under the radar. And then, once the mailing address changed, notices stopped coming to me, so he could draw more, quietly. The debt wasn't in his name, it was in mine. And suddenly I understood why he wanted to sell the house. If he sold it, he could pay off the line of credit and walk away clean. He could take whatever was left and leave me with nothing but paperwork and shock. He'd turn my home into his exit strategy. That's why Carol said the sale so confidently. That's why Ron brought a clipboard. They weren't helping Mark move. They were helping him cash out. Daniel filed something called a lis pendens on my property, a notice that there was a legal dispute attached to the house, a public flag, a stop sign, meaning no sale could go through without the world knowing something was wrong. The next day, my phone lit up with calls from Mark. I let it ring. He texted, "Why would you do that?" I didn't answer. He texted again, "You're destroying my life." I stared at the screen, jaw tight. My life, my house, my credit, my security. And he had the nerve. Then Carol called. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her voice was no longer syrup. It was steel. "You will regret this, Lena. You think you're clever. You're not. You don't know who you're dealing with." I saved it, because threats are also receipts. And I was done letting them throw things without consequences. Over the next 2 weeks, Mark's mask slipped. He started showing up at my work parking lot. He started emailing my boss. He started accidentally sending my private documents to my sister. He wanted me embarrassed, unstable, pressured. He wanted me to fold, because if I folded, the house would be easy again. But I didn't fold. I changed every password, every security question, every bank pin, every login. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I filed a police report for the fraudulent deed, and I requested the notary's journal entry. That was the turning point, because notaries, if they do their job properly, have a record, a log, a signature, an ID copy, a thumbprint sometimes. Daniel subpoenaed it, and when it came back, there was no entry, no log, no record of me signing anything that day, meaning either the notary never met me or the stamp was stolen. And when Daniel called me with that, his voice carried something I hadn't heard before. "Good," he said. Not good like relief. Good like momentum. "Lena," he said, "this is strong. This is fraud. And fraud gets ugly for the people committing it." I closed my eyes, because I wasn't afraid of ugly anymore. I was tired of being polite. Mark tried to negotiate after that. He sent an email, suddenly calm again. He offered to walk away if I dropped the lice pendants. He offered to pay back what he borrowed. He offered to be reasonable, always that word. Daniel laughed when he read it. "He's panicking," he said. "He knows he can't sell now. He knows the debt is exposed. And he knows if the police take this seriously, he's in trouble. But trouble doesn't happen just because it should. It happens when you push it there." So we pushed. We filed to invalidate the quitclaim deed. We filed for injunctive relief to keep him away from the property. We demanded a full accounting of the line of credit. And then something else happened, something Mark didn't expect. The bank's fraud department called, not me calling them calling me, because when Daniel's letters hit their legal team, the bank started reviewing, and banks hate 2 things: fraud and being sued for enabling it. They pulled the file. They saw the power of attorney. They saw the mailing address change. They saw the withdrawals, and they asked one question that made my throat tighten. "Ms. Parker," the investigator said, "did you authorize these draws?" "No," I said, steady. Silence. Then, "Okay, we're going to open a fraud case." A fraud case. That phrase felt like a door opening, because up until then, everything had been Mark telling his story. But now, institutions were listening to mine. Mark's parents showed up again 2 weeks later. No moving truck this time, just anger. Carol stood on my porch without sunglasses now. Her face looked older, tighter, less controlled. Ron's jaw worked like he wanted to chew through the door. Mark stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I didn't open the door. I didn't even go near it. I watched through the camera. Carol leaned in and hissed like she forgot it was recording. "You think you're going to win because you filed some paperwork? We built that house. We deserve—" I pressed talk. "You didn't build anything," I said, "and you're on camera." Carol froze. Mark's eyes flicked to the doorbell. For the first time, I saw something flash across his face. Not confidence, fear. Because he realized I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was documenting, and documentation was my language. They left again. But this time, the threat was different. It wasn't about them showing up with a truck. It was about what would happen in court. Court took 2 months, because legal systems move like molasses. But behind the scenes, everything was accelerating. The bank froze the line of credit. They demanded repayment. They started investigating the power of attorney. Mark tried to claim I'd verbally authorized him. That didn't work, because verbal authorization doesn't change forms, doesn't change signatures, doesn't change recorded deeds. Then Daniel did something brilliant. He found a detail Mark forgot. The house wasn't just in my name. It was in a trust, a simple living trust I'd created years before marriage. Because my father died young and taught me that paperwork matters. I'd put the house into the trust for estate planning, meaning, technically, I didn't own the house personally. The trust did. And Mark, in his rush to file a quitclaim deed, had tried to transfer something I didn't legally hold as an individual, which made his deed not just fraudulent, but structurally invalid. Daniel explained it on the phone like he was delivering a verdict. He can't claim title to something he didn't properly receive, and he can't receive it because you can't transfer a trust property like that without trustee authority. I leaned against the kitchen counter, dizzy. So, what does that mean? It means, Daniel said, his deed is trash. Trash. That word felt like breathing again. But Mark wasn't done. He tried one final move. He filed for divorce on an emergency basis, claiming he had marital interest and requesting temporary exclusive use of the home. Exclusive use? Meaning, he wanted a judge to order me out. He wanted to use the legal system like a crowbar. Daniel wasn't rattled. He said, "Okay, let's go." The hearing was on a Thursday. I wore a navy suit, no jewelry, hair pulled back. I didn't want to look sad. I wanted to look precise. Mark sat across the courtroom in a gray suit, looking like the reasonable man he practiced being. Carol and Ron sat behind him, whispering like they were still running the show. The judge was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes. She listened while Mark's attorney spoke. He claimed Mark contributed. He claimed Mark maintained. He claimed Mark had rights. He claimed I was being vindictive. Then Daniel stood. He didn't argue emotionally. He didn't insult. He laid down facts. He presented the original deed, my name only, before marriage. He presented trust documents. He presented the recorded quitclaim deed and the notary discrepancy. He presented the bank fraud case number. He played Carol's voicemail threat. He played the doorbell camera clip of Carol saying, "We deserve," on my porch. The courtroom got quiet. Not the kind of quiet that's polite, the kind of quiet that's heavy. Then the judge leaned forward and asked Mark one question. "Mr. Parker," she said, "did you file a deed transferring property without your wife's knowledge?" Mark opened his mouth. He looked at his lawyer. He looked at his parents. And for the first time, he looked like a man who couldn't charm his way out. I thought she knew," he stammered. The judge's gaze didn't soften. "And did you open a line of credit on this property?" Mark's jaw worked. "I had permission." Daniel held up the power of attorney. "The power of attorney is being challenged," he said calmly, "and the bank's fraud department has opened an investigation." The judge exhaled through her nose. Then she said a sentence I will never forget. "This court will not reward deception." Mark's face drained. Carol shifted like she wanted to stand up and protest, but Ron grabbed her arm. The judge continued. Temporary exclusive use is denied. The petitioner is ordered to stay away from the property, except through counsel for retrieval of personal belongings, scheduled and supervised. Any further attempts to enter without consent will be treated seriously. Treated seriously. I felt the room tilt, not because I was dizzy, because for the first time, someone with power had drawn a line. Mark's attorney leaned in to whisper to him. Mark didn't move. Carol's mouth opened, then closed. Ron stared at the floor, and I realized their moving truck plan had depended on one thing: my silence, my fear, my willingness to be nice. But the second I stopped being nice, their entire structure collapsed. After court, Mark tried to talk to me in the hallway. Lena, Daniel stepped between us. Through counsel, he said. Mark's eyes flashed. And then he did something desperate. He said loudly, "You're ruining me." People turned. The judge's clerk looked up. And in that moment, his performance worked against him. Because he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a man caught. The legal process didn't end that day. But the power shift did. Over the next month, the bank reversed the fraudulent draws and moved the balance into Mark's responsibility through their fraud resolution process and civil demands. The county recorder flagged the quitclaim deed for investigation, and Daniel filed to have it formally voided. Mark's parents stopped calling because their confidence had been built on the idea that I wouldn't fight, that I'd be embarrassed, that I'd want peace more than justice. They were wrong. One afternoon, a different truck came. Not a moving truck, a locksmith truck. Because Daniel advised me to change everything again. New locks, new smart keypad, new garage code. I watched from the porch as the locksmith drilled the old deadbolt out, and I realized something painful and freeing at the same time. I wasn't locking Mark out. I was locking myself back in. That night, I sat on my couch with a blanket over my legs, the house quiet in the normal way again. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. And I thought about the way Carol said, the sale, like it was inevitable. Like my home was a prize they deserved. Like my life was something they could schedule with a truck. But houses don't belong to the loudest people. They belong to the people who pay and protect and persist. Mark wanted a clean exit. He wanted to cash out. He wanted to leave me with paperwork and regret. Instead, he left with consequences. And the funny thing about consequences is that they don't need moving trucks. They just arrive, quietly, with signatures that actually match. Months later, the divorce finalized. Mark didn't get the house. He didn't get a payout. He didn't even get the satisfaction of making me beg. The judge ordered him to repay legal fees tied to the fraudulent filings. And when the recorded deed was officially voided, I framed the court order, not because I'm petty, because I'm free. It sits in my home office, above my desk, right next to the original closing photo of me holding the keys years ago, smiling alone before Mark, before his parents, before I knew love could come with an agenda. And sometimes, when I walk past it, I stop and stare, not with anger, with gratitude, because I learned something that day they showed up with a moving truck. You don't protect your life by being polite to people who are trying to take it. You protect it by knowing your paperwork, knowing your boundaries, and knowing when to call the truth what it is. Fraud, manipulation, control dressed up as family. So if someone ever shows up at your door with confidence and a plan, remember this. Confidence doesn't mean they're right. It just means they're counting on you to doubt yourself. Don't. Because the moment you stop doubting, the power changes hands. And sometimes, the simplest word in the world becomes the strongest one you'll ever say. Number. And you don't even have to open the door to say it. The day after court, I expected silence, not peace, not relief. Just that hollow pause that comes after a fight when you're waiting to see what kind of person your opponent really is. Because some people lose and walk away, and some people lose and decide to burn everything on the way out. Mark was the second kind. It started with small things. A package accidentally delivered to his old address, then forwarded back to me with a note taped on it in black ink. "You're welcome." I didn't respond. Then an email from the HOA. A complaint. Anonymous, of course. Excessive trash stored in garage. Unauthorized shed modifications. Unapproved exterior paint touch-ups. My garage was clean. My shed was permitted. My paint was the exact same color it had been for years. But the complaint wasn't about rules. It was about pressure. Because pressure makes people tired, and tired people make mistakes. And Mark wanted me tired. Then came the calls. Not from him, from unfamiliar numbers. First one, a man claiming he was with a debt collection agency. "Ms. Parker, we're contacting you about an outstanding balance associated with property improvements." My throat tightened. "I don't have any outstanding balances," I said. He read off a company name I didn't recognize, then an amount that made my stomach flip. "Ma'am, it's tied to a contractor invoice." Contractor. My father-in-law's world. I ended the call and immediately called Daniel. He didn't sound surprised. "They're trying to create noise," he said. "They want you panicked. Forward me anything you get." So I did. Every email, every voicemail, every weird invoice. I built a folder labeled Parker, harassment, because the moment you start documenting, you stop feeling helpless. And helplessness was the only thing Mark ever really wanted from me. A week later, Daniel called. "Lena," he said, "I want you to brace yourself." My stomach sank. "What now?" He exhaled. Mark's attorney filed a motion claiming the trust transfer was fraudulent. He's arguing the house was moved into trust to hide marital assets. I laughed. One sharp sound that startled even me. That trust existed before I met him. "I know," Daniel said, "but desperate people file desperate motions." Desperate. That was the word again. And suddenly I remembered Mark's face when the officer asked for a court order. That slight pause, that flicker of fear. He wasn't confident anymore. He was scrambling, which meant he was dangerous. Daniel scheduled another hearing, another morning, in that same courtroom. Another set of eyes judging which story sounded more believable. But this time, I was ready. I didn't just bring documents. I brought receipts. Old trust paperwork dated years before our marriage. The original attorney's email. The bank statement showing trust-related property tax payments going back forever. Daniel laid it out like a timeline. Then he did something that made Mark's lawyer blink. He requested sanctions. In simple language, he asked the judge to punish Mark for filing frivolous motions designed to harass. The judge listened. She didn't smile. She didn't scold. She just asked Mark's attorney, "What evidence do you have this was done to conceal assets?" Mark's attorney fumbled. He didn't have evidence. He had suspicion. And suspicion is what people use when they want to control the narrative without facts. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Motion denied," she said. "And counsel, consider this your warning." Warning? I felt my lungs expand like I'd been holding my breath for months. Mark didn't look at me. He kept his eyes forward, like if he didn't meet mine, he could pretend he was still the one with power. But power isn't a feeling. It's leverage. And his leverage was evaporating. That afternoon, I came home and found something on my porch, a cardboard box, no return address, just my name in thick marker. I didn't touch it. I stood there staring, because you learn quickly that when someone loses control, they start sending messages, sometimes literal ones. I called Daniel. He said, "Don't open it. Take a photo, call non-emergency, and have an officer present." So I did. An officer arrived, calm and polite, and stood with me while I cut the tape with trembling hands. Inside the box were photos, printed photos, pictures of me, walking into my office, carrying groceries, sitting in my car. My throat closed. The officer's face tightened. "These were taken recently?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. There was also a note, 3 words. "You can't hide." My hands went numb. The officer asked if I had an order of protection. Not yet. But by that evening, Daniel was filing for one, because harassment becomes stalking the moment it starts feeling like a map. 2 days later, the temporary protection order was granted. Mark was ordered to stay a certain distance away. No contact, no third-party contact through his parents, no showing up, no accidents. And when the officer served him, apparently Mark had laughed. At least, that's what the process server told me later. He smiled and said, "She's really doing this, huh?" Yes, I really was. Because the moving truck wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing he thought he could keep reaching into my life whenever he wanted, that he thought marriage gave him permanent access, that he thought family meant he could trespass emotionally and legally. But that's not love. That's ownership, and I don't belong to anyone. A month passed. The house grew quieter, not in a lonely way, in a safe way. I started sleeping through the night again. I started taking my coffee out to the back patio, watching the morning light spill across the yard like the world was gently apologizing. Then one Friday, Daniel called. His tone was different, focused. "Lena," he said, "the bank completed their investigation." My pulse picked up. And? They determined the withdrawals were unauthorized. They're closing the line of credit. They're also sending a demand letter to Mark. A demand letter, meaning the bank wanted its money from him, not me. I sat down hard on my couch. For a second, I couldn't speak, because I hadn't realized how much of my fear was tied to that debt. Debt is invisible until it's yours. Then it's all you can see. "And the forged deed?" I asked. Daniel paused. "The county recorder is cooperating. We're filing a petition to void it officially. It's moving." Moving? Funny word. Because that's what started this. A moving truck. A plan to shove my life into cardboard boxes. Now, the only thing moving was justice. Mark didn't take that well. He couldn't. Because he'd built his identity on the idea that he was smarter than everyone, that he could move pieces and people would follow. So when pieces stopped moving, he tried to flip the board. He violated the protection order, not directly. He was too careful for that. He used Carol. One evening, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. Carol's voice, soft again, almost motherly. "Lena, honey, we need to talk. This has gone too far. He's not doing well. You don't want this on your conscience." Conscience. Her favorite weapon. I forwarded it to Daniel. Daniel forwarded it to the court. A week later, we were back in front of the judge. And the judge did not look amused. "She was ordered to cease contact," Daniel said calmly. "This is third-party contact on behalf of the restrained party." Carol sat behind Mark, face stiff. Mark stared at the table. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Parker," she said, "do you understand what an order is?" Mark's voice came out small. "Yes." "Then follow it," she said, "or I will escalate." "Escalate." Mark swallowed. Carol's eyes flashed. The only part of her that still believed she could intimidate someone into obedience. But she wasn't intimidating the judge. And suddenly, Carol looked like what she really was. A woman used to controlling rooms, stuck in a room she couldn't control. After that, they stopped. Not because they changed, because they were cornered. And there's a difference. Then came the final twist. The thing I didn't see coming. The thing Mark didn't plan for. A certified letter arrived addressed to me from the IRS. My hands went cold the second I saw it, because government letters don't arrive for fun. I opened it slowly. It said there was a discrepancy in reported income tied to a business, and that my name was listed as a responsible party. Responsible party. My eyes blurred. What business? Then I saw it. A construction LLC. Ron's company. My father-in-law's company. Somehow, my name had been added. I sat down at the kitchen table, letters shaking in my hands, trying to understand how a man who always looked so proper could drag me into something that big. Then I remembered the power of attorney. I called Daniel. His voice went hard. "They used it," he said. "They used it for more than the mortgage." I felt sick, because now I understood the moving truck wasn't just about the house. It was about cleaning up traces. It was about cashing out, shifting liabilities, erasing paper trails. If they sold the house quickly, Mark could pay the HELOC and maybe bury other problems too. But now the house was frozen. The bank was investigating, and the IRS letter meant somebody had been doing something sloppy or something criminal. Daniel told me not to panic. He said, "We're going to respond properly. We're going to tell them you disputed. We're going to provide evidence you never consented." Evidence. Always evidence. So I pulled my credit reports again, and there it was. A business account opened, a card, a line of credit tied to the LLC, and my name associated with it. I felt a rage so clean it was almost calm. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was theft, identity theft, fraud. And suddenly, Mark wasn't just trying to steal my house. He was trying to steal my entire financial existence. I filed an identity theft report. I filed fraud affidavits. Daniel contacted the IRS with documentation. And then, he did something that changed the entire direction of the story. He suggested we meet with a federal investigator. Not because we wanted drama, because when financial fraud crosses certain lines, it stops being a private divorce issue. It becomes a crime. We met in a plain office downtown. A man in a suit asked me questions while a small recorder blinked on the table. Did I sign documents? Did I approve accounts? Did I authorize changes? No. 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 Each no felt like reclaiming my name. The investigator nodded and wrote notes. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "Ms. Parker, you may not be the only one." Not the only one. Meaning? Ron's company might have been doing this to other people too. Meaning? Carol's confidence might have been built on a pattern of taking and twisting paperwork until victims didn't know where to start. But I knew where to start, because I'd already started. A month later, I got a call from Daniel. His voice was quiet, sober. "Lena," he said, "Mark's attorney reached out." "What does he want?" Daniel paused. "He wants to settle, fully. No claim to the house, no payout. He's agreeing to pay attorney fees. He wants the Ellis pendants lifted after the deed is voided. He wants this to end." I stared at the wall, because that wasn't Mark. Mark didn't end things. Mark squeezed. "Why now?" I asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because something bigger is happening, and he's scared." Scared. The word tasted unfamiliar. Because Mark never acted scared around me. He acted entitled. But fear makes people surrender things they swore they'd die for. So we negotiated, not for revenge, for safety, for closure, for a clean paper trail that restored what was mine. The settlement included a written admission that Mark had no ownership interest in the house. It included repayment of fees. It included an agreement that his parents would cease all contact. And it included this part. Mark had to sign an affidavit supporting the petition to void the forged deed, meaning he had to help undo the fraud he created. Daniel told me it was rare, but possible when someone wants to survive what's coming. The day Mark signed, he didn't look at me. We met at Daniel's office with a notary present, one Daniel trusted. Mark's hand shook slightly as he held the pen. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me, because I knew his hands. He signed, then he slid the papers across the table. Daniel gathered them. Mark stood, cleared his throat like he wanted to say something. Then he stopped, and he walked out. No speech, no apology, just the sound of the door clicking shut. And that click felt louder than any moving truck ever could. A week later, the court granted the petition. The forged deed was officially void, the record corrected. My title clean again, my name restored. I went to the county office and requested a certified copy. When it arrived, I held it like it was something fragile, because the truth is, your home isn't just wood and nails. It's the place your nervous system learns what safe means. And for months, my body hadn't known. That night, I stood in my living room and looked around. Same walls, same couch, same scuff mark on the baseboard from when Mark moved a dresser too close and didn't apologize. But the feeling was different, because the ownership was not just legal again, it was emotional. I belonged here, not because a document said so, because I fought for it. A few months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ron's company was being audited, that accounts were being examined, that people were asking questions. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Because I didn't need revenge. I needed distance. And distance is its own kind of victory. The last time I saw Carol, it was accidental, at a grocery store. She was in the produce aisle, picking up avocados like she still controlled the world. She saw me. Her face tightened. She opened her mouth like she was about to speak. And then she stopped. Because there was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound like what it was. A woman who tried to move someone out of her own home with a truck. A woman who thought family was a crowbar. I didn't glare. I didn't smirk. I just nodded once, polite, calm, and walked away. Because the best revenge isn't a speech. It's a life that keeps going without them. And I did keep going. I planted new flowers in the front yard. I repainted the guest room the color I actually wanted. I installed new cameras. Not because I lived in fear, but because I lived in truth. And truth is protective. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I still think about that first doorbell chime. That moment I looked at my phone and saw the moving truck like a threat parked on my curb. I think about how small I felt for a second, and then I think about what happened next. How I didn't open the door. How I didn't argue for hours. How I didn't beg to be treated fairly. I called for help. I documented. I hired the right people. I used the system the way it was meant to be used. And I learned a lesson that sits deep in my bones now. People who want to take from you will always call it simple. They'll call it clean. They'll call it family. They'll call it fair. But fairness doesn't arrive on a moving truck. It arrives with boundaries, with proof, with the courage to say, you don't get to rewrite my life just because you want to. You don't get to walk into my home and treat me like furniture you can rearrange. You don't get to be loud and call it love. So if you're ever standing in your kitchen one morning, coffee in your hand, heart in your throat, and you look out at your curb and see someone else's plan idling in front of your house, remember this. You don't owe them your door. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them the version of you that used to keep the peace, because peace isn't keeping quiet while people rob you. Peace is knowing you're allowed to protect what you built. And when you finally protect it, you'll be surprised how quickly the people who claimed they were helping start backing away, not because you became mean, because you became clear. And clarity is the one thing manipulators can't stand. They need fog. They need confusion. They need you wondering if you're overreacting. But the moment you stop wondering, they lose. And that's the truth Mark's family learned the day they showed up with a moving truck and found out my house wasn't the thing they could take. It was the thing that taught me how to fight. And once you learn that, no one ever moves you out again.